This is Troy with Big Water UAV Solutions, and my letter to the FAA regarding the remote ID proposal is coming up next. Dear FAA, this letter is in regards to the proposed FAA's Notice of Rulemaking on UAS Remote ID, docket number FAA-2019-1100. My comments are as follows. I've been a Part 107 pilot since March of 2017 and have run a commercial drone business since then. I am also in possession of 107.29 daylight waiver. I am a safe and conscientious pilot. And while I agree on the need for remote ID, as this is a foundation for UTM and will enable BVLOS, I believe the current proposal is questionable and leaves too many unanswered questions. With the subscription-based remote ID, I am worried that this becomes a pay-to-play scenario where perhaps certain airspace corridors cost more to fly in, certain airspace is restricted to just the big boys, and it eventually locks out the small commercial operators. Somewhat similar to how the FCC communications bands are divided up and were sold. Standard remote ID states that the UAV must both broadcast its position, altitude, and the UAV serial number or a proposed session ID via the radio band, and also broadcast its information via the internet or cell service to a designated remote ID USSS provider. The information to be broadcast would be available not only to law enforcement, but also to the general public via an app. This information being available to law enforcement does not bother me in the least. However, my private information being disseminated to the general public is of great concern, and I believe can and probably will lead to retaliatory action for perceived invasions of privacy. Supposedly, the remote ID session ID eliminates the user's information being available to the general public, but this is not guaranteed. After all, another driver can't look up your name or address based upon your license plate number from your vehicle. Why should anyone in my operational area be able to do that other than law enforcement? Additional questions need to be answered and clarified about the remote ID USSS provider storing this information. We all know that any information that is out there in the cloud can and probably will be hacked or breached, so data protection and retention policies concern me. Additionally, according to a sample flight listed in your document, if your connection to the designated remote ID USSS provider is unavailable or down, you will not be allowed to fly unless you have a roaming plan which will connect to a secondary remote ID USSS provider. If no providers are available when connected to the internet, even though you have the internet connection, you will not be allowed to fly. What about areas that do not have any remote ID providers? Will the entire country have remote ID USS coverage on day one? Will the broadcast via radio band component resolve this? The majority of my work takes place in areas without, or at the very least, with intermittent cell coverage, and this requirement concerns me. Will the proposed cell connection be from the controller, the UAV, or your cell phone? Will the equipment vendors decide this, or will the FAA mandate this? What about those who do not wish to purchase a data plan? Additional operating costs must be factored in besides the cost of a subscription to a remote ID USSS provider. Though I write this from a perspective of a commercial Part 107 drone pilot, some of the detrimental effects of the remote ID proposal on recreational pilots concern me greatly. Again, I believe that the intention of remote ID is a good thing. However, several of the proposals raise a multitude of questions and would effectively end the home-built and FPV recreational pilots. It would box these users into designated areas yet to be determined, an unnecessary restriction placed on users who fly for fun. Many of these areas may be out of reach for recreational pilots to travel to, thus ending the dream of flight for many. Applications must be submitted for these areas, and once the deadline for submissions are up, no more will be allowed. I can certainly understand the need for these areas in other than Class G airspace. Class G airspace does not require any restrictions or generally any reporting requirements for private pilots. Their only real responsibility is to see and avoid conflicting aircraft. I question why additional restrictions should be placed on recreational UAS pilots in Class G airspace with a UAS that does not have the capability to broadcast its information. Nefarious aircraft have the potential to be much more dangerous than a small UAS. While radar can certainly see an aircraft in normal flight, a person bent on using an aircraft can cause much havoc before authorities can react. Where a UAS could be dismantled and brought down by jamming its control signal over any critical infrastructure or areas. Joe Rancher, who owns 400 acres in the middle of nowhere, flying his home-built drone, which does not broadcast its information 100 feet above ground level in Class G airspace, is not a threat to anyone. Respectfully yours, Troy R. Lutz, Chief Pilot, Owner, Bigwater UAV Solutions, LLC. You can still do your part. Comments are still being accepted until March 2nd on this proposal. I suggest, if you care anything about the UAS community, whether it's being commercial or recreational or FPV, we all got to fight for each other on this, even though we all have particular reasons why we may or may not agree with certain aspects of the proposal. But let's help each other out and definitely comment. I believe they are going to at least take the comments into consideration. I guess we'll see. Peace.